So welcome, bonjour, hi, welcome to the stream. I'm Frank Boucher. I'm a Microsoft Cloud Advocate, and today with me another Cloud Advocate. And of course, I'm waiting until he take his sip of coffee or anything he's drinking to introduce him. John Papa. John, how are you?
I'm doing great, Frank. Thanks for inviting me on Twitch. It's been a hiatus for me.
Wonderful. And we'll be talking about Azure Static Web App today. Am I correct?
That's what you told me, yes.
Yeah, I decided. Of course. All guessed it. I ruled them. Say, yeah, you will be talking about this and that. And
You're such a drill sergeant, you know?
yeah, I'm sure of it. I'm sure everybody will trust that. I'm sure of that. Oh my god. Yeah, no. So that's very. I was very happy because that's one of the last kind of. Do you consider that this has a product in Azure, or like, because it's a little bit more than just a feature. It's not like they had the new backup. Like, it's really its own category. And of course, the dog will be barking. Sorry for that. A little bit of noise here.
That's okay. If you'd like, I can bring my dog in and they can talk to each other. Because that could be a very fascinating Twitch stream.
Yeah, that will definitely be, but less Azure related though. But yeah,
True. Yeah, it's I never know if to call them products or services, but yes,
Oh
I
yeah,
use it
service. That's what. Yeah,
interchangeably.
it's more than a feature. That was my point.
Yeah, it's got its own. I mean, it's on the same list of things you can do in Azure as app service and Azure Functions, etc. But really, I think you're thinking about it right because it's really a aggregation or a collection of many services from Azure put together
Mm-hmm.
in a really nice and easy to use way that scales really, really well. So yes, it's a new product because there's things in it that you can't get outside of it. But it's as we talk more about it, I think it'll make sense and why this is a confusing thing to talk about.
Excellent. So then, should we get started?
Now, I think our time's up. We should just end the Twitch stream now.
Okay.
And
Well, have a good day, everybody. I will see you tomorrow. Let me switch scenes so we can see your screen.
okay, and I
And
am going to.
and voila. Yeah, you should hide me because I'm.
But I'd like to see you.
Yeah, but it's
All right.
too much of me for everybody, I think.
You know, everybody out there knows you. Frank knows you can't get enough Frank.
Tell that to my wife.
All right, let's see. 1, 2, 3. I was going to zoom in a little on that too. Cool.
Excellent.
Look. So where do you want to start? How do you want to roll things out of here?
Let's clarify a little bit. Like we're just open kind of the Pandora box, saying like, okay, what is it, like the static website, and like where why it's different than like just using it on a regular server or anything. What's that beast?
Well, let's actually go check this out. We're gonna wing a couple of these things because that's what you and I agreed to. Let's go look at the main documentation page
Yep.
for Azure Static Web Apps and see if it can help us explain a little bit.
Excellent. And just for the folks in the chat who would like to follow us, I'll put the link in the chat for them.
And it looks like the screen hasn't updated yet in the stream. I love how the stream's like 10 seconds behind. It's always fun.
Oh yeah, if you're following on the Twitch, there's a little delay.
Yeah, so one of the keys to Azure Static Web Apps is, and they talk about here, like, what does it really do? The key things is it's going to give you a static website and optionally serverless functions. And put those two things together because you have something to display. That's your HTML, JavaScript, CSS. And you're going to have some kind of data access to something somewhere, whether it's your own database or another API or whatever. So functions kind of helps you there. And then it deploys all that stuff easily on Azure. And that's the 10-second version of what this does.
So I have a question for you then.
Yes.
Let's assume my grandma is in the chat and she doesn't know what a static website is. Like why today in 2020 a static, because like static website of okay, we understand that, like it's HTML, like it doesn't change. It's not like a server side where like things are built on the fly.
Yeah.
But why today that thing is useful? Because we want things to be dynamics. If I'm adding a new blog post, I want, like if I'm using a static website for a blog, I want that thing to had the I want that thing to grow and change. So how does that work?
It's a good question. I one of the things I don't like about modern technology, and this goes across the board on everything, really, is we meaning technologists, have made the words we use so confusing to everybody. And sometimes I think we do it just because we think we're cute and clever.
Okay.
So what the heck does static mean? Really what we're looking at is there's HTML, JavaScript, and CSS in our web apps. Pretty much everything we do these days revolves around those three things. So let's just call them web apps, things that we use those three things to build with. Why do we call it static? Because once we build the assets, we build all the stuff. Because you can't just, and we can talk about the build process too, but with modern JavaScript and web frameworks, you can't just say, I'm writing my code, I'm going to go publish it, because you want to make sure it's small, it's optimized, everything works together. Mm-hmm. So there's always a build process these days. Not always, but most of the time. So the static part comes in on once you build it, it's done. Like your HTML and JavaScript and CSS don't change at that point unless you physically go change them. So all you have to do is take those files, put them up on a CDN or a web server or whatever, and just serve them. Those things don't change. And that's why CDNs are so cool, because you can literally put that stuff up on a CDN, get it at the edge of the internet, and whether one person or a million people hit your site, they're all getting it wicked fast. So the static part of it is, once you're done writing the code, you don't have to send anything new for HTML and JavaScript and CSS to the client until you publish a new version of it, which for obvious reasons.
Yep.
So that's the static side of static web apps, and quite frankly, I just call them web apps.
Okay. So all the generation, we'll review that later, but that's before they are published. And then what's the function role in like that thing if the content is static?
The functions, and I want to stress that they are optional. So Azure functions are optional in this model. But just looking here at the screen, for example, here's a picture of an app that you could write. And it's got like a list of groceries. This is a pretend app that I wrote for a couple demonstrations. Imagine this is an app that you wrote that in today's society, you're trying to connect people who need groceries with people who can't go get them because of COVID. Yep. So Frank's going to go out there. I don't want to leave my house. Frank's going to go out there and get my groceries for me based on this list. So it's a web app that
expect a few days of delay for the shipping.
Especially if you hand deliver, yes. So this is the idea here is you've got an app like this, and on this app, there's obviously HTML displaying the content. There's CSS for the styling, and then there's JavaScript for the functionality, right?
Yep. But client-side JavaScript.
Yeah, all client-side. And where do functions come into play is, how do I get this list? Like, where does this come from? A database somewhere. But how does the client app, the web browser, talk to the database? It's through code. And that code has to run in a function, literally a function, that's either written in serverless technology, which is what we're talking about here, or you could build a web server that runs ASP.NET Web API or PHP or Java or Node, or you pick your favorite backend.
Yep.
But why pick a web server? Why crank up an entirely new web server and a VM to run a function that goes and gets your list of shopping when you could just use serverless?
Yeah.
Because then you don't have anything to maintain. It's just the function that goes and gets me my list of groceries.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yes, because then storage is one of the resources in Azure was really budget friendly. It's one of the cheapest.
Yep.
And they're the serverless who you just get billed by the time it runs. So getting the list of your grocery, if it takes 2 seconds, then you're billed 2 seconds, right?
Exactly. You're billed for what you use on consumption for your functions, and obviously for the storage, which the storage is
Yeah.
holding.
There's a little bit of more of that, but like
Yeah.
in a whole, like it is a very very budget friendly solution
Yes.
compared
And we're
to
not
if your
talking about
server is there, then like the server is up and running 24/7, so like you're paying for it 24/7.
right. If you had a full blown server,
Yeah.
and not only just paying for it, but you've also got to maintain it and do security updates and patches, and yeah, you know.
Yeah, well, if it's your thing, good, but we're talking developer here.
So Frank, if you think this is a good time to do it, the pitch I try to show about static web apps and why this is valuable, maybe it's worth spending 2 or 3 minutes going through that to explain it to the viewers.
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
Okay, so the idea here, and this comes from a presentation I've given, I'm just going to give it a little bit of it, is that you're a developer somewhere. Like if you're interested in doing this, you're probably a developer or a manager of developers, for example. And what you want to do is you've got a web app of some kind. Let's say it's this grocery list, and you want to deploy it. So you wrote the app, now you want to get it out there. Your company probably wants to make sure it's got, it's really robust. Well, what does robust mean? So let's think about this. You've got your code, and the code itself is what you wrote, and it's what's running the app. You feel great about that piece. Well, you just want to deploy it, right? So you're like, I just want to push it to GitHub and somehow get it to the cloud so the world can see it. So Frank's grandma can get her grocery list up there. Okay, simple enough. But you also probably want CI/CD. That's an assumption we're making. You want, as soon as you push, you want this thing to continuously deliver to the cloud. So every time I push, I want it to do whatever it has to do to get it ready, and then push it up to, let's say in this case, Azure. So grandma can get her groceries again. All right, well, what about the APIs? Now, as Frank mentioned, you've got to go get data for that list of groceries. Are you going to hold up your own web server, or are you going to host them on serverless? You got to make that choice. Something else to think about. Once you put in something running your APIs, so something's running that code, whether it's serverless or a web server, and you've got your app running, you really have two things. You've got your app and you've got the APIs. And has anybody ever heard of something called CORS? So CORS runs into play now. Now you've got to route your requests from something served on one server, your app, to your APIs on another server. And you've got to allow that. And how do you scale those communications? So now you need routing with tools like a reverse proxy or CORS. My head's starting to hurt. Then your company says, hey, you know what? We also want a custom domain. I don't want some crazy URL. I want this to be at franksgrandmasgrocerylist.com or whatever it happens to be. And I want to set up a secure connection with SSL and get my own certificate. Great. Is that going to cost money? How's that going to work? Oh, and yeah, by the way, we're going to have like preferred customers and non-preferred customers. So we'll let anybody use our site as long as we know who they are. And to do that, we need authentication. So we need to know Frank is actually Frank. And we need security roles so that we have preferred users who come in and can say, you know what? Yes, you're Frank, but Frank bought the preferred level of our company's policy, whatever it is, like a subscription, let's say. So I need to know who they are, because to those preferred members, you can also access the discounts at local grocery stores. Oh, and by the way, this needs to work in Asia, Africa, Western Europe, United States, wherever, South America. So we need global scale. So we need this site to be accessible all around the world. Holy smokes, Frank. This is the problem, right? Everybody writes code, but then they just assume that as soon as they push it to the web, they're going to get all those things. And that's where Azure Static Web Apps, to me, really comes into play, because it gives you your app and lets you just focus on that thing. Whether you're writing it with Angular or React or Svelte or Vue, And this is when I'm going to switch over and show you. You can be a developer in any of these things, whether it's Alpine, by the way, new JavaScript framework, Angular, Aurelia, Backbone, 11t, Elm, Ember, Flutter, Gatsby, Glimmer, Gridsome, HTML, and I'm not going to read the rest. But it doesn't matter what kind of developer you are for the web, you're going to have these problems. And that's where something like Static Web Apps comes into play, because it lets you literally just focus on the code. You hook it up to Azure Static Web Apps, and then it publishes your app and gives you all the things we just talked about. So that's the real pitch of this, because this kind of a model is becoming more and more prevalent on the web today. Companies want to run websites without having to have servers in the back end and deal with all the security issues. And I'll give you one more thing. I worked at a company a couple of years ago where we had 7 environments. So we had, I always forget them all. There was like dev and staging and load test and QA, training, and then there was prod and light prod. I forget what they called the light prod. There were like 2 versions of prod.
Nothing for the DBAs?
Probably was one there too.
Yeah, because last time I worked at a place with 7 environment, there's like DBAs, like there are DBAs QA and the DBAs prod, and like you continue. It was long. So many.
It's a lot, and let's say you've got a web server and you've got to support 7 environments. Now you've got 7 servers you've got to pay for. With something like this, you're not paying for any of that. You go back to that model you mentioned, and now you're just paying a couple pennies a month for whatever your function usage is,
Yep. Pretty cool.
So that's the idea behind all this. Does that make any sense to anybody?
For me, yeah. We got one question. I think we should keep it for later. But do you still see the chat, John, or do you want me to read
I do.
it?
I'm looking at it on my phone here.
So from Silicon Orchid.
Hey, both. I currently use the older way with AZ storage and CDN. With the newer AZ static apps, is it served from a single location? Let's answer these one at a time. So when you say older way with AZ storage and CDN, yes, you could literally set up your own storage solution, your own CDN, buy your own SSL certificate, hook up functions, set up cores, maybe use Azure Front Door. I'll stop going on, but you could do all that yourself. It'll probably be very painful, quite frankly, and you might need Frank to help you hook it up, but you could still do that. With the newer version, Silicon Orchid's asking, is it served from a single location? No, it's served from multiple points of presence around the world. I believe we may even be adding others, although I won't commit to that because I'm not on the engineering team, so I can't. But I believe it's in the US, Europe, Asia, and Africa right now, although exact locations, I'm not sure which ones.
So a CDN is kind of embedded inside that thing.
Yeah, and I'm being careful not to say CDN because it's not specifically the Azure CDN product.
Okay.
It's something that they've built for this product, I believe.
Oh, you know what? I didn't know that. Learning something every day.
So she or he is asking, would I still need to add something like AZ CDN on top of this service? No, you don't need to in order to get global performance. No. Or is it a version of CDN wrapped into the service? No, it is. It's basically a custom solution. Azure has a lot of products and services. So basically, they came up with a way to do the global presence behind the scenes using the same technology as the Azure CDN stuff. Good question.
And the other one was, is there any staging slots? Does it use staging slots?
Yeah, so Azure has something they call slots, right? Which is a way for you to have multiple versions of your app or environments, like we were just saying, QA and staging, etc. Right now, Azure Static Web Apps is in preview, which most of the rest of the world calls like beta. You're right.
It's a strong preview, but yeah, okay.
Yes. So it's not the way Azure does things is preview means it's available to the public and you can use it, but this isn't across the board. And I'm not a marketing person, so grain of salt here. But to me as a developer, what that means is it's available, you can use it, you'll get support, but things might change a little bit, and I probably wouldn't roll out like Walmart.com on it now this minute. I'd wait for it to go to the next level, which is called GA, which is general availability, which is when you get full-blown service is grown up into an adult or a major.
But right now there's no staging slot, right?
There is one with preview.
Oh, really? Oh, there's one.
One.
Okay. Okay, so you could have prod and staging or whatever. Like you have one side.
Yep.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought it was no for now. Okay, that's cool.
Hey, Frank, since I don't have access to it, can you type into the chat shopathome.dev as a URL? It's up in my little URL there, you can see.
Oh, I don't see it because we have the title, but let's
okay.
shop.
I'll put it into our chat.
.net, you said?
.dev. I'll put it into our Skype chat.
Oh, excellent. I think I got it right. Let me test it so I'm not sending everybody somewhere else. And boom. I will add that to the show note too.
Yeah, that will work. So that's a custom domain that I bought just so I could do this demo and have it around. This is my main slot, right? This is my production version of it. But what I've also done is if I go to the GitHub button here, we'll just open up the GitHub repo. One of the things that you'll notice is that I've got a pull request open where I set up a staging pull request. And I'll click on that. And what I've done, and we'll show how to do all this, but what I've done is I set up this pull request, and by default with the preview, you get one staging slot, or they call it a preview. And right here you can see I've got a URL, which is like a crazy URL. It's commos something or other. And if I click on that, you'll see now here's the app and it's in green. And I did that on purpose. So what's on the left is the main production version of the app. What's on the right is my pull request with that URL.
Okay, so they call it preview in the vocabulary of the static website, but then to align it with Silicon Orchid question, that's your QA slot.
Yeah, it could be staging or...
Oh, staging, yeah, I said QA. Yeah, staging.
Yeah,
oh, you know what? I didn't know that. I thought for now it was just one thing, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it is. And just to show you the difference there, you'll notice not only is it green, but this version I wrote in Vue, and the version on the left I wrote in Svelte, just to show that like the pull request could be massive code changes or minor little tweaks. But it allows me to now test this preview one, without affecting the other one, and then I can switch them as soon as I merge into master. So I'll go get rid of that button there.
Wonderful. So great question, Silicon Orchid. Great question.
And hello to all of you. I see a lot of hellos in the chat, so awesome. Feel free to ask any questions along the way. So I guess the next step on this would be, all right, if we step back and we wonder, why do you need some of this stuff? Let's go back to this presentation because I think this will help make sense. So I mentioned, you could use like there's 30 plus web frameworks out there. You can use anything you want. This one repo I'm going to show has these four. It's got Angular, React, Svelte, and Vue because they're probably the most talked about ones these days, arguably. But you can use any of them. Now, what you really have to think about with these is all the modern web frameworks have this command that we run with Node called npm run build. This is when we take the JavaScript and we use cool words like we talked about earlier, like mangling and minification, which basically means take the big JavaScript file and compile it down into a smaller file that we can send to the browser. Because you don't want to send more stuff to the browser than we need, because that's wasting time, right? So the npm run build command puts all that together for you. And what they do is they run like this here, and out comes 3 files generally. You're going to get your HTML file, your main page, and you're going to get a JavaScript file and a CSS file. That's like the minimum that you're going to get with most of these sites. And effectively, that's what lights up your app. So with that, Azure Static Web Apps can do all that for you. So there's my name. What you're really getting here is 3 main things. You're going to build and host your app. Obviously, I don't want to miss any assumptions here, but you need to host the app somewhere. You can also add authentication and authorization, which if you've ever done this, adding authentication and authorization is not always easy to applications. When you see what we do today, I think it's going to be pretty impressive. And then optionally, again, the auth is also optional, by the way. You don't need it if you don't have to have it. But the APIs with functions are also a nice feature.
Yeah, for a blog, I know like static website, a lot of blog are running on static website. You don't really need an authentication or authorization for a blog.
Exactly. And one of the things that we'll deploy, we'll use, maybe we'll pick Eleventy or Hugo. And we'll show how these are common blog platforms. We could show how you can push an Eleventy site up to Azure Static Web Apps with no auth, no APIs, and just see it run.
Yeah.
Oh, and it's I always forget this part. It's really important, but right now it's powered by GitHub Actions. So it actually just adds what you call a GitHub Action file to your GitHub repo, which is what basically powers the build and then the deployment to Azure.
The workflow procedure to do all the mingling, like you said.
Yeah. And this, we end basically where we had before at the beginning with the docs. This is where you end up having your static content gets deployed, your APIs get deployed, and collectively they are known as your static web apps. And you don't have to set up cores or reverse proxies or nothing. They know how to talk to each other out of the box. All that security is there, and you get an SSL certificate. Looks like we have some questions. Do you want to?
Yeah, like I was just waiting for you to, we need to put some content before asking all those questions. But yeah. So I'm assuming Matt Labo was asking for the ratio traffic. So usually when you have different slots, sometimes you will have 20% going to your staging or your QA, and then and still part of your resources using the production, and then you could migrate and go more and more. But in the static web app, since you don't have any backend, like you have the backend if you have the API, but that's function. Can you still do that kind of thing? Can you play with the traffic?
Well, first of all, the answer to any question is always yes. It depends what you want to do and how much effort you want to put into it. But is it baked into static web apps to have what I call a dial-up strategy? No.
Okay.
Let me explain that. So like a dial-up strategy is what we're saying is you've got a main production site, and then you've got some new features you want to roll out. And they're in a second site. And they're in your preview, as we're calling it. You can have both those running. But if you really want is, let's say 80% of your users to hit your production site and 20% to hit this new features to kind of test them out, what you really need is some kind of a F5, or that's a product, reverse proxy, load balancer, etc., to divert traffic.
Yeah.
And I call it dial-up because what you're doing is maybe it's 20% today, but next week it's 30%. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like you're growing until your canary just like.
Exactly. So can you do that with this? Yes, Azure has products that'll do that, but out of the box, Static Web Apps will not let you go between the two. You have to pick which one gets the custom domain. But that's, Matt, I really like this question. And if you like this feature, because I love it, maybe we can put the GitHub repo into the chat and have Matt open up an issue on the GitHub repo for Azure Static Web Apps.
I will do that right away. Because it is baked in the regular web app, right? So I think it's where that thought come from.
Yeah, and I'll put the link to the repo in our chat again, Frank, so you don't have to copy it.
Okay. So.
I'll try to make your life easy today. But yeah, if you go to issues here, Matt, if it's not there already, I've got to authenticate. That's fantastic. There we go. You could go ahead and check that out here. This is basically where we're directing people to go to this repo and the issues and add issues here for anything that they want or any problems that they have. While you're doing that, I'll answer. Silicon Orchid's got another question here. At the moment, AZ CDN provides a free SSL cert, which is super nice after having to do this all by myself in the past. I'm not sure if John already said this, but do you have the option for free SSL just the same? And I'm sure you can add your own if you have one. So yes, with Azure Static Web Apps, you get a free SSL cert out of the box. It just comes with it, which is great. Can you bring your own SSL cert? I don't think that's there today, although I know that's a common question, that if you have your own SSL cert, how can you connect it to it? And I have to believe, I don't know this for a fact, but I have to believe that's going to be one of those things that comes with this. Yeah. That would be my guess. Like if let's just type in SSL. It's not there. So at Silicon Orchid, if I could beg you and Frank could beg you, this would be a great thing for you to add to the issues if you want to bring your own SSL cert. Another question here from Silicon Orchid. You got lots of good questions today. I have a can you question that maybe not yet. Can you serve sites from an Apex domain? Last time I was asked, it was not yet, but the team is looking at. How about if I told you yes, kind of? So
it depends. That's the new version of it depends.
You can't see this, I think, as Frank's screen is cutting off the very top of the URL. But if you go to that shopathome.dev, which Frank put in there into the chat, you'll notice that you could just type shopathome.dev, which is an Apex domain. Let me back up. What's Apex? Apex domains are also known as naked domains or root domains, meaning when you go to google.com, you might just type in google.com, not www.google.com. So by not having to say www. That means it's an Apex domain. Out of the box, there is no support for Apex domains. However, we have a blog post that the amazing Burke Holland wrote, which walks you through how to connect Cloudflare to your site to effectively give you the Apex domain. So I can literally type shopathome.dev and it goes right to my site. And it takes like 5 minutes to set up through Cloudflare. But I know this is on the radar to automatically do from Azure as well. So yes, not yet, but you can do it right now, and it's working. Like, I don't know if you can see what I'm doing, but I literally just typed in shop at home.
If you just not maximize your window, we'll missing just a few pixel. Yeah.
There we go. Can you see the URL now, Frank?
Yeah, it's tiny, but I can see it.
Yeah, I don't know how to make that bigger.
You're on Mac, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I don't know how to zoom on Mac.
So you'll notice like this URL is at www, but if I get rid of the www, and I'll get rid of the home just to be clear, I can literally just type, I can even get rid of the HTTPS, I really just type shopathome.dev, and it redirects automatically to where it's supposed to go. So the Apex domain can work. I believe if we go back to the docs.
So today you just need to do it with Cloudflare. It's very simple, but probably that it will be embedded sometime close in the future.
Yes, and I think it might be in, where the heck is it? I know Burke wrote a blog post on this. And what we did is we linked to it from here for now. Custom domain, I think it's where it is. Apex. So I can open up that. Here is the blog post that Burke wrote in May. I'll plop that into the chat for you.
Yep, I was just about to ask that for you.
So Silicon Orchid, great question. If you follow those steps, it took me, well, be honest, I'll have an honest moment here. It took me 15 minutes to do it the first time, not 5 minutes, because I read the article too fast. So
it's classic from all of us, right? You think you
Yes.
know it, it's just like, yeah, okay, no, I understand. And then like, oh, I missed that part where they say, don't do that. Or Uncheck the checkbox.
And I felt so bad. I'm like texting with Burke, he's friends of ours, and I'm like, your stuff doesn't work. And he's like, did you do this? I'm like, no.
Oh my god. Bang. Hey, we
We all
got raided by Coded Live. So welcome, raiders. Party of 9 people. Just join us. Talking about static website, web app.
Yeah, we got a couple other people in here too. Just to catch people up, we're talking about static web apps, and we haven't deployed an app yet, but we probably should.
Yeah, maybe we should. Do you want to do it now, or do you want to cover some other grounds before?
Let's cover a little bit here just to show what we're going to do.
Okay.
So here's my demo slide, just to kind of give you an idea. What we're going to do is we're going to deploy that whole shop at home website just to another place. And I'll take you from ground zero. So we're going to have an app. It's going to have an API, and it's going to have auth. For the first demo, all we're going to do is deploy the app itself. We just have GitHub, and that's it. So let's just go to GitHub and just deploy the app.
Sounds good.
So
Sounds
first,
like an easy plan.
where is my GitHub repo? There it is. Too many tabs, man. So if you want to try this at home, you can. It's github.com/johnpapa/shop-at-home is the GitHub repo. This is the GitHub repo for the URL that we were just showing. Inside this repo, there's an Angular, React, Svelte, and Vue version of the app. Just because I like to, whatever you like to use, you can use whatever version. We're going to use Svelte today because I've been loving Svelte lately. But instead of using this repo, here's a cool feature some of you may not know. This repo is a template repo. So if I go up to the top, I can type in /template. Or I can click this big green button, which is easier. And we click that, and it's going to say, okay, basically what it's going to do, it's going to create a new repository in your organization and name it whatever you want. We're going to call this Frank Twitch. And I'm going to keep it public so you can all see it. Probably
so
won't
it's
live
an alternative as Fork. I didn't know that.
It's similar. So Fork gives you all the branches. Give you all the Git history and everything. What template does, and you have to tell your repo it is a template, is it gives you, in this case, just the master branch.
The snapshot of the last version, right?
Yes, the most recent version. And I could choose all branches, but I just want master.
That's cool. I didn't know that, Jake. Wow.
I'm going to do that. So it's created the new repository. It should only take a few seconds. Yada, yada, yada. This is where you can sing the Jeopardy song. And then, one thing I don't want is, remember, the repo I just took it from is actually connected to Azure Static Web Apps. So I want to not have that here because we're going to do it from scratch. So inside this GitHub Workflows folder, there's a file here. And we're going to ignore this file for now. I'm going to delete it right from GitHub by clicking on the trash can. And I'm going to commit it right to master. And the reason I'm doing that is because when you start with your own project, you're not going to have that file. So now we've got this repo. And this repo is right here. And we have all these versions of the app. And we'll go look at the Svelte app folder. Here's my package.json, which you can see in there. I've got a build command. I've got my dependencies in there. Very simple setup. So that's the app itself. Now, if I want to go deploy this, I have to go to Azure. And I'm going to log in. By the way, you can use a free trial to do this. And once I'm in Azure, I can go click Create a New Resource. And I can type in something like Static Web Apps Preview. I'll make this bigger. I'm going to click on Create. Now, here's the interesting part. Why is it in this one? Hold on, I'm in the wrong place. There we go. That's because I work for Microsoft.
While we're waiting for loading, do you know if it's in the roadmap to be able to deploy from a FTP?
Deploy from FTP. I don't know. That'd be interesting to find out. Why am I in preview? Hey Frank, I'm in the MS portal.
Give me 1 second. I will share with you a link.
Oh, it worked. Sorry, clicking that button let me do it. Okay, so sorry folks. That's because Frank and I work for Microsoft, so we had a special version of the portal. You won't have that, and you don't need it.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's a broken version.
Yes. So here's the real version. It's at portal.azure. And you have to have a subscription to Azure, which again, you can get a free trial. We can try to get that later. A resource group is basically like, think of it like a folder or a drawer in your dresser. It's basically, where are you going to put this thing? So let's create a new one. I'm going to call it Papa Delete Frank Twitch. So I'm going to delete it later.
Yep. A lot of time I call it to delete. That's my resource group name.
And then we can name our app. We can call this Frank Twitch. It doesn't have to be in the same name as the repo, but I'm going to do that. And then we can tell it, what region do I want to put this in? Now, it's going to be globally distributed. So that might feel a little weird, but it's going to be globally distributed, but there's certain parts of it that will only go in one region because there's other things behind the scenes. So I'm going to choose East US because that's where I happen to be. And then I'm going to sign in with GitHub. And because I've already authorized GitHub to do this, it didn't prompt me, but it would prompt you the first time. And then I'm going to tell it, go to my John Papa organization. I have like 200 repos, so I'm going to type in Frank. And it will filter down to the only Frank repo I have. And then I'm going to choose the only branch that I care about, which is master. So I've now connected it to that repo that we created over here. Next, you might be tempted to click on Review and Create, but you should click on Next Build. Because this is where you're going to tell it information about your app. And these are the most important questions. Where is my app located in that repo? And let's bring this up side by side just so we can see it. So on the right, we can see the repo, and we can see that the app is actually located in a subfolder called Svelte app. So because the app isn't in the root, I'm going to type in just Svelte app. Now, let's just pretend we have no API location. I'm going to type in doesn't exist as my folder name for API, because if it doesn't find it, it won't work, which is fine. And here's the hardest question. I don't like the wording for this, and we're trying to take feedback on it. What this question is asking you for the app artifact is, after you run npm run build, or whatever you run to build your app, where is the folder in that Svelte app folder that will be what Azure needs to deploy? So like when you run the app with Svelte, it's actually going to put all of its content in the public folder. When you run it with Angular, it's going to put it in dist / the name of the app. So this is different based on what tool you're using. So I have a little handy dandy guide, by the way, if you're ever confused in this. In the Hello Worlds repo, if you scroll down to your app, like Svelte right here, there's the name of the folder that it by default will publish to. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to type in public because we're using a Svelte app. Notice public exists over here. Doesn't have to exist in GitHub because maybe it gets built on the fly. So as long as we have the name of the folder where it exists, wherever our API is, and then, because we're going to skip for now, and then the name of where's the assets. Then we're going to click this blue button. It's going to let us review the choices. Then we're going to click Create. And now behind the scenes, Azure is creating all the resources that we just mentioned earlier so it can build this application. And now you can see here, it's got some links. Our URL, Frank, you'll be happy to know, is called Happy Coast.
Wonderful.
If we click on that, you're going to see it's not it's live, but it's waiting for your content. So it's kind of live because it's building the app for the first time. So we'll kill that. And if we go look at the deployment history, the GitHub action runs, It's going to open up our repo, go right to the Actions tab, and you're going to see this CI add Azure Static Web Apps workflow file. This file was added to the repo by Static Web Apps in Azure. And you can see it's yellow because it's in process. So if we click on this, we'll see what the heck this thing is doing. We can see there's a build and deploy job step. Right now it's building and deploying. What does that mean? Let's go back to the action. And we'll click on it again. You see this workflow file. This is what was added to the repo. It's saying that when it's looking at master.
Could you zoom, John?
Yeah.
Told you I was the advocate of make it bigger.
You got it. So it's looking at the master branch for us because you can tell to which branch to look at. And the key is really down here between lines 28 and 33. So right there to there. That's why there's comments. Notice that these are the values that we typed in when we just filled out that form. Mm-hmm. So we can change these later. But these steps are basically saying go ahead and whenever there's a change to master, go ahead and rerun the build process for this application. So let's go back to the actions.
So that's a YAML file that was added, and that's what we call the GitHub action. And they are a workflow, so like any build process step, like a list of steps that some agent will execute.
Yeah, it's our CI, our continuous integration, and it's our CD, our continuous deployment. Because when it's done, you notice it's got a green check mark now. And just to avoid the elephant in the room, the reason there's an X down here, remember I deleted a file when we first made the repo?
Yep.
That file was an action, and it was going to fail because I deleted it. So now if we go look at it, the job completed. And you can see it builded it and deployed it. I can't speak. So down here, you can look what it's doing. It ran npm install right here. And it does all of its stuff. We don't really care, but at the end, the key is now go visit your site at Happy Coast. So I can either do it from here, or I can go back to the portal and click on Happy Coast right here. And there's our app.
Way. I don't have any sound effects, but
yeah, basically, and how long did that take? Let's go look. It'll actually tell you. 1 minute and 13 seconds.
Pretty good.
So this might be a good point to, we've done the app, right? So far, all we've done is we've created the app. Here, let me show you.
There's a few questions related to the, so you had feedback based on your requests for feedback for the artifact.
Yeah.
So there had some people saying build artifacts. So Chris Skidder was saying build artifacts.
I like that.
What? Some people were asking if the application was validated.
In the build details, does application validate the app path it's put in, or is that a string? Oh, I think I know what you mean there. Okay, so yes, when you type in the application, which we did when we went through the Azure portal here.
It was just a string.
It's just a string. It gets validated when it runs the workflow file. It currently doesn't get validated when you're entering in the portal. Although that's a feature I would like, and I've asked the team for. But then again, I've asked for literally about 150 features. So
yeah. That's a thing that I don't see that in any right now creation of object in Azure. So that would be different.
It'd be a great service though. Like things like Netlify and Versal, which are other products.
But in Azure, I mean, there's not. But it would make sense because like that path exists. It's in GitHub. You could just go in the GitHub and you have the URL from the GitHub from like the question just on top of it.
Exactly.
So yeah. So answer is it's just a string. Artifact was also something Michael found frustrating or confusing when he start in ups. And I agree with him. When I started playing with those artifacts, for me was really confusing to that word. I was like, what's an artifact? I was not sure exactly what it was. But then like
And Michael, please add that to the issues on GitHub. Frank put the link in there. Maybe you can pop it back in for the issues. But this topic, we're in preview. So artifact is a word they chose, but nothing is off the table for changing, right? It's in preview. So if you have better ideas, I like the idea of build or built assets or build artifacts. Artifacts is a funny word. Makes me think of Indiana Jones, you know?
I'm happy you went there because that's where my mind would go.
Yeah.
I was, I just didn't say it. We had also one question from, how can I say his name? Umen Hook. We didn't talk about SSL certification in custom domain, though you mentioned it earlier. So
let's go look at it.
It's not when you create it. I'm assuming it's after when things are deployed.
Yes and no. So there was two questions there. There's SSL cert and custom domains.
Yep.
Out of the box, obviously we didn't get a custom domain because we didn't tell it to do it, right? But if you click on the little lock up here, I'm in Chrome, you'll notice the connection is secure and there's a certificate. So there's already a certificate associated with this site that came out of the box. If we want to custom domain it, well, that's the next demo.
Oh, excellent. Excellent. So just stay with us.
In YAML files, tabs or spaces from El Bruno MVP.
Now, Bruno,
I'm a total spaces guy, Bruno, so. But I'm not a YAML fan. I got to be honest with you.
It's the only language you could screw up with one space.
Oh my gosh. Yes, and I have.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Same here. But hell, Bruno, like to drop those kind of questions.
No, those are good. A simple nerd, yeah, gotcha. I'd assume the dev filling out the form knows the app. Yeah, you would assume it, but it still would be nice, like if you made a typo. So I totally get your question.
Oh yeah, so, definitely. Like it would be wonderful because sometimes like, oh, is it / backslash? Like, do I need to have the trailing slash? Like, all those like worst case, it's not the end of the world. It's just like your build failed, and then like you need to change, and like it's not dramatic because once it's set, it's set. But it will be a nice experience, a nicer experience.
Well, the next step for us is what do we get, right? So far, what have we gotten for what we did?
Yep.
And I mentioned this before, like we have GitHub, but we got the global scale. Like automatically, this thing is deployed around the world to multiple points of presence. We got a custom domain, which I'll show you how to do very much next. We're going to hook up functions.
Ooh.
And then this symbol means it's the routing. It's like setting up cores between the functions in the app. So want to go set up custom domains, Frank?
Oh, yeah.
What you would do...
Just to keep you in time, we have about 30 minutes.
Oh, cool. Cool. With plenty. So back in the portal, you notice over here on the left, we've got these buttons. I'll make it even bigger. Custom domains is where you'd go for custom domains. And here you click the add button.
Wouldn't guess.
Well, I laugh and Frank laughs, but sometimes the words to the menus in here are confusing.
Oh yeah, no kidding. Yeah, that's for sure. And like it's worse. Like I do a lot of French content sometime, and when I switch the portal in French, oh my god.
So in here, it's actually telling you the two things you need to do. What it's not telling you here is you need to go buy your own custom domain first, right? Like Azure's not going to go give you Amazon.com, right, or something like that. You've got to go buy your URL from any provider, Google DNS or GoDaddy or whatever you want. Once you get your domain, and I bought shop@home.dev, which is why the other one works. It was like $7. And here, what it's telling you is go to your domain provider, your DNS provider, and create this CNAME. And if you don't know what that is, when you go to your domain provider and you go to DNS, there's a tab for it. All you do is you add a record called a CNAME. There's a button for it. And it wants three things. For www, add a CNAME, and you put this exact value in there. So basically, you're telling the internet that when you go to frankstwitch.com, whatever domain you buy, it's going to actually point to this happy coast, yada, yada, yada at Azure. And then down below, you put your custom domain. So for me, this is where I put shop@home.dev. Now, I'm not going to add it here because we've already done this in my other app. So let's go back to my Shop at Home app on the portal. Here it is. If I go to custom domains, you'll see there's my custom domain right there. I've already added it. This takes anywhere from, in my experience, 5 minutes to an hour. Why? Because creating the record takes a minute. But after the DNS record's created, all the internet servers have to go and, propagate and let you know that, yeah, that's where you're going.
Yeah, they're chit-chatting about the last news and like passing the message.
Yeah. So that's how you set up a custom domain, which is super, super easy. But let's say we're back in our app now, and if I want to go look at the list of shopping, if I click on that, we're going to have a problem. Like, I don't even know if it shows an error. We'll see. Let's go to the console. And I'm trying to grab the little button. There we go. And notice it's saying unauthorized, and I'm getting a bunch of errors. That's because there is no API right now.
It's hard to call them when they're not there.
Yep. So before we go hook up the API, do we have any other questions in there?
Yep. I think
I like this.
Bell Data was asking, I guess it depends on the IP address or the OS browser default link. Oh no, like that's the portal related.
Yes, yeah.
So I think it's Canaps. I don't know how to pronounce the name.
Could I talk about the multiple points of presence? Sure. When creating the app in the portal, it prompts you to select a single region. Yes, and there are certain, like behind the scenes, like you're getting storage. Storage is Azure Storage, which hosts your content. You're going to get Azure Functions for your APIs if you have APIs, which we'll do in a minute. You're going to get, your points of presence. You're going to get, it's actually using a product called Key Vault for Azure to handle your SSL certificate. So you're getting a bunch of different Azure stuff behind the scenes. So we're choosing a region because some of those things don't need to be propagated around the world. So it's going to pick the region closest to you for those things. Whereas the points of presence, which is where all your storage is, which is where your HTML is for ease of use, all your HTML is actually propagated to all the regions that the points of presence support. And I forget exactly which ones they are. But that's why you're choosing a region up front. Really good question, Capinex. And a simple nerd's asking, are there dev logs if a user changes a domain, app, or some other things? That's a really good point. What if you make configuration changes and you want to see those changes? That'd be nice. I don't know if that ability is there, but I'm going to look into that myself. And if you'd like to.
Monitor doesn't track that in Azure?
I'm not sure if, so you can hook up Azure Monitor to Static Web Apps very easily. It's just adding a key, and I'll show you how to do that. But I'm not sure if it picks up those kind of changes, like did the custom domain changed? But I'm going to ask the team and find out. That's a great question. Thank you, A Simple Nerd. Let's show you where that happens, by the way. So like here's my production site. Under configuration, you should see my Azure Monitor key value right there. There's my App Insights instrumentation key, and it's hidden, so you can't have it. But basically, all I did was I set up App Insights, which monitors, does telemetry and logging for you, and I connected it to this site by putting the key value in this configuration. So you can think of this like an environment file for your application, which you might be familiar with if you do Node or ASP.NET or Java. Excuse me. Really good questions. Let's see here. Chris Ketter, my auth is related to using it when developing locally is something that can be proxied. I think Chris is asking, can you do your authorization locally and not just in production. Today, you cannot, although our good buddy Frank Wasim, who works on our team, is working on an app, and he might be close to being done, which allows you to do authorization locally, so you can test it while you're developing on your local machine. We'll show auth 2 in a minute. Hello, what are we using to create the static app? In this case, W. Robinson, great question. We use the Azure portal. We went right to the Azure portal. I have a subscription because I work for Microsoft, but if you sign up with a free trial, you can use that. And right now, we probably should say this, Frank, Azure Static Web Apps, the preview is 100% free. So everything you do in it is completely free.
Oh, you thought it was... in my mind, when I read the Robinson question, it was like, what did you do for creating the HTML?
Oh, okay.
Not like that's my... the way I understood the question.
Well, I could answer that too. I use Svelte in this case. I just went to and if you want to try one of your own, by the way, go back to this John Papa Hello Worlds repo, and there's literally whatever your favorite web framework is, it's got to be here. And there's actually a pull request right now for Blazor. So ASP.NETers, that will be in here very soon. We're just vetting it, making sure it works. And it's called Hello Worlds because it's like the simplest version of all these different apps.
Is it the community kit?
Nope. I will pop this into your chat. It's literally called John Papa /Hello Worlds.
Okay. I will paste it in the chat, everybody, in 1.5 seconds.
If you're not familiar with me, folks, one thing you'll learn quickly is I have a repo for everything. So iHumanHuck is asking, I already added my custom domain, but I was not able to add an SSL certificate. I believe you're asking if you want to add your own certificate. I don't believe that is currently supported, but that is high on our list of features to add. Again, we're in preview. If that's important to you, and I assume it is, please add that to the GitHub issues.
Yeah, the static website that we just put earlier in the chat, go there, open an issue, or just do a +1 or if the issue is already created earlier in the chat.
And Matt Lebeau is asking about, he's using WASM with probably Blazor Spa right now. Should that work too? Yeah, there's actually a way to make it work today. If you Google Blazor and Static Web Apps, a blog post by Tim Hewer, who works with us at Microsoft, he wrote how to do it in a blog post. Yeah. But there will be one here within like a week as well in this repo.
Yeah, Christopher Manner also, I think, wrote a blog post about that.
Great. So since we're on limited time, let's go build some more of this stuff, just show how it works real quick.
Yep.
All right, so we're back in our app. We want to add functions. Any of you who saw me do this knew that when I filled out I'm looking for the repo. There we go. Knew that when we filled out the workflow file, which another way to get there, by the way, is to go to the root of the repo, click on GitHub Workflows. There's the file. You know that I typed in a non-existent folder for the API location called doesn't exist, when in fact it actually does exist. The name of the API folder in this repo, we'll go up here real quick and show you, is actually called API. So I already created some Azure functions in this folder, and you could create your own. So in here, what I need to do is I need to change this to point to API. So just because I don't want to go into VS Code yet, I can just edit this file by clicking on the pencil. I can go to doesn't exist, type API. I'm going to start a commit. I'll tell it to commit directly to master. Normally I'd make a new branch. Actually, should I? Yeah, let's do it. Let's create a new branch because this shows off the preview URL.
Excellent.
So we'll do a new branch. We'll propose the changes.
And right now, because we are in preview, it's only Azure Function and JavaScript that are supported. Am I correct? Like by default, I mean?
Right now, by default, it's just JavaScript. Although definitely high on the list is Python and .NET, for example. I'm going to create a pull request now. And then when I create the pull request, something cool is going to happen. So I've got a pull request, and you'll notice some things are queuing up here, these jobs. This is because we have the workflow file looking at master, and it just noticed I made a pull request of my new branch to master. So what's happening here is saying, hey, there's a workflow file looking at this, and it's going to run. Now, if I click on details, notice my workflow file is running again. And what it's going to do is, and it should take about a minute, right? I think it took a minute last time. It's going to go through and it's going to build the app and deploy it. But let's go ahead and look at the actions for a minute. I'll make this full screen. If we look at the one that worked before, and I go back to deploy and build on the left, and I look at build and deploy, I kind of skimmed through all this stuff before, but I want to show you what happened here. There was a step where it said, I'm going to run npm install, and that worked. But if I look for the word doesn't exist, notice it's got a message here saying, warning, the API directory location could not be found. Instead of erroring out, because I gave it an invalid folder, it's saying Azure functions will not be created. So it's just going to skip it. So this build process looks and says, look, if I can find your API, I'm going to try to deploy it. But if there is no API, that's fine. I'm just going to deploy your app without it. But now our new action, so our new pull request, which was queued up 2 minutes ago, should be close to being done. And instead of looking here, because that'll turn green as soon as it's ready, if we go back to the pull request, and we look at this one right here, because that's the one we just created, as soon as it's done, two magical things are going to happen, which I really like. One, it's going to turn green, hopefully, because it means it worked. Red will mean it didn't. And the second thing is, it's deploying it to another URL. We need to know what that URL is. It's actually going to add a comment right to this pull request telling you where that staging URL is. So we'll give it a second here to go through that. Any questions on here? Would this demo showcase a rolling back a deploy? No, this demo will not show it. It's built, by the way. It will not show us rolling back a deploy because we're actually having to deploy to two separate URLs.
I mean, to showcase like a rollback, what you need is to revert in Git, and then it will redeploy, right?
Yeah, and that's, you could do that there. Notice here now we have a new URL which looks like the old one. So if we go look at the old one, it's this Happy Coast 08BA blah blah blah. It looks the same, but there's something special here. Notice it says East US 2 in the middle. This is another place that the region you chose shows up. Your staging slot or your preview slot is only deployed to one region. This one is not deployed around the world. And this may change in the future, I don't know, but this is how it works today. And if I click on that, now you're going to see there's the app. They look the same. There's the original. And there's the new app. If I click on the list, hopefully we have an API. Oh, I forgot to add one other thing, but the API should be there if I go to, I got to remember the API. I think it's /API/products. Oh, I haven't logged in. That's why. So I'm going to log in with my Twitter account. I'm going to grant consent, and bam, there's my data. So we just showed how to hook up the API, which is super easy to do. Let's see here. Other stuff here in the questions. Oh, glad we're talking about static web apps. I have a question. Definitely Mr. Smoofy. I like your name, by the way. Files in the container are case sensitive, served through anonymous access, and are available through read operations. So if you have a link deleted, but someone goes to it, they get a 404. I'll take your word for that. I haven't tried that, but that sounds like it makes sense. Is there a question on that? Are you trying to see if maybe you could redirect? Feel free to add that back in, Mr. Smoofy, if you can elaborate on your question. I think I'm going to call you Mr. Smoofy from now on, Frank. Mr. Smoofy, why? Why what? I'm sorry.
So if you have an about HTML, but someone goes to about, they got the 404 page.
Look, are you reading next? I'm not seeing that. IIS link deleted and link deleted are the same.
Oh, so I was wondering if it's the file are case sensitive, maybe.
Well, to show you here, for example, like let's go to capital products. Notice here, it doesn't know what that is in this particular case. So if I go lowercase, it does work.
Yeah, so it is case sensitive. I'm assuming because it's based on Azure Storage, and storage is case sensitive.
Oh, he's saying his link's getting deleted. Sorry. Gotcha. Oh, Twitch. Yeah. Gotcha. Yeah, right now they are case sensitive. And if you have concerns about that, again, please go to the issues for the GitHub and file your issue there. And the team can look at that and listen to your concerns. Frank, we need to look at auth because auth is amazing.
Yeah, let's do that because we have 15 minutes max.
Okay.
Well,
so
I don't think we have anybody after, but I know you're busy. So.
No worries. I got to remember what app I'm looking at. Okay, I'm looking at the secondary app. Let's go back. Let's just use this one. In the secondary app, notice I had to authenticate. One of the cool things about this, if I can go back to the GitHub repo, where was that GitHub repo? Let's go back to John Papa at GitHub. What did I call it? Frank Twitch? I think so. Yeah, there it is. Yep. If we go into the Svelte app and I go to public, there's a file in here called routes.json. Now, I already put this in there. I cheated a little bit. This is a special file that is deployed in the public folder. Mm-hmm. It's important it's in the public folder because remember, that's the folder we're deploying to Azure.
In that specific, in the Svelte framework.
With Svelte, it happens to go to public, yes.
So it could it could change based on the framework you're using.
Yes. So if we go back to the hello worlds, like if I was using React, let's go find that. It would be in the build folder.
Okay.
If I was using Vue,
so it's in the artifact folder. That's where that file needs to be.
Exactly.
Root, right? You said at the root.
Yeah, the root of that artifact folder. So in this file, I've got a couple things here. What I've done is I've said, look, I want you to, when somebody goes to use auth, which we're using easy auth, that's what's baked into it. If somebody tries to authenticate with Facebook or Google, notice I'm saying return a status code of 404. I'm basically disallowing people to authenticate with Facebook or Google, just for no other reason than just to show you how to do it. But if they try to log in with any of these 5, by default, all 5 are supported. That's Azure Active Directory, GitHub, Twitter, Google, or Facebook. Because I did not disallow Twitter, I can just click on Twitter, and it will redirect me back there if I've already authenticated with it. Notice now it's saying, welcome, John Papa. That's my Twitter ID, and you've logged in with Twitter. And then I can log out as well. So that's what that routes JSON file is showing. And then here I'm saying, look, you cannot see the discounts unless you're in a preferred role. Now, we didn't show how to set up a preferred role, but if I go back to, let's go to the production app just to show it. Mm-hmm. So I'm in my list. Notice I can't see it because I'm unauthorized. But if I go to Twitter, I'm now authenticated. Goes back to the app. I can see the list data as soon as the function runs and gets my data out of my database. But if I click on discounts, I'm not authorized. That's because I have to be in this preferred role to see them. So how do you do that? Well, if we go back to the portal, we go into the Shop at Home app, and now if I click on Role Management on the left, notice I have said that, and I've already set this up, my John Papa GitHub ID has these roles. You always get anonymous and authenticated. But I also added one that I named preferred. So, Frank, what is your Twitter handle?
F Boucheros. So FBoucheros.
Like that?
Yep.
Great. And you pick the domain, which you can pick your main domain or your secondary one, the preview URL. And I can give you a role. I can say, hey, Frank's going to be preferred. And I can say the invitation is going to expire in an hour. I can generate this. I then copy this link and I can give it to Frank. Let me just do that in chat real quick. Why not? So, Frank, click on that crazy link I just gave you in Skype.
Trust you, sir. Boom.
Always trust me.
App authorize. Done.
All right, and if I refresh.
Oh, grant consent. Sorry, I missed one.
Yeah, you got a grant. Yeah.
Yep.
And there we go. So everybody can see now Frank's Twitter provider and now also has preferred. So what does this mean? It means if I go in with my GitHub ID, which we'll do real quick, I'm going to log out of Twitter. And instead, I'm going to use GitHub. Now I'm logged in with GitHub, and notice I can see the discounts, I can see the lists, I can do anything I want inside of here. So when Frank goes to this site and he uses Twitter, you could also now see the discounts too, Frank.
Yeah.
And then the rest of these routes, I'm just setting up route. You don't have to have these routes, but this is for me to say I wanted every user who authenticates to see the shopping list, but I wanted only the users who are in preferred to be able to see the discounts and to edit the shopping list. It's just a way of setting up roles, and you can set as many of these up as you want, the roles. And I believe you only get 25 users today, although I have to look in the docs to refresh my memory. So that's how many users you can set up with your app by default for the free preview.
Okay. Well, preview that is free. So 20 user for free. It's good.
25, I think.
20,
yeah.
Whatever, like 20 something, 20-ish.
Yeah. Something like that. And if we go look at here in the docs, here's authentication. I'm gonna look for 25. It's not in there. It tells you all about the roles and how to add them. Here's the 5 authentication providers you can choose. Let's see here. Removing user. You can also remove users. Like I can go back and I can say, Frank, I don't like you anymore. I can click on you and I can delete you. Bye, Frank.
You won't delete me, but you could delete my account. Yeah.
That'd be so cool. I just deleted Frank off of Twitter. And there's so much more you can do, but like that is really the crux of it. And to kind of wrap up that piece, we can take some questions. The cool thing is we literally just did all of this by setting up, the GitHub. We got our global scale with points of presence. We got a custom domain, an SSL cert, Azure functions. We have cores with a reverse proxy. We got CI/CD. We've got our authentication and authorization and routing control. Like we can actually set up 404s and redirects, and basically all this stuff we talked about is everything you get inside of Azure Static Web Apps. And just because we work for Microsoft, Frank and I have to show that if you want to try this yourself, you can click on any of these links to find the docs or to try this out for yourself. There's a online tutorial at Microsoft Learn here. That's the aka.ms/SWA for Static Web Apps frameworks. If you go to that link, you can actually try all this yourself, and you don't even need to sign up for Azure. There's a free sandbox. You literally press a button and it sets up a sandbox in Azure, so you can deploy React, Angular, Vue, or Svelte.
Yeah, I put a clickable link for the Learn module in the chat.
Sweet.
Super easy. That's cool to learn because you have all the exercise and they have the sandbox thing, I think.
Yep.
Cool.
I saw a question here too from a simple nerd. How long does the preview URL last after it's merged into master? Once the PR goes away, the URL goes away. So once you close that pull request, at least that's been my experience. Once the pull request is gone, that preview URL is not there anymore. So you'll notice I kept my pull request open like forever. If we go to my app and I click on code in GitHub, if I go to my pull request, this pull request has been open since May 18th because I wanted to keep using that URL, which I can just click on the pull request now and you can just see there's the URL right there. Good question. Let's see here.
Outlook really simple. That is nice. Are user role permission limited to a certain number too? The role-based permission, I think you could create what I like. I'm assuming there's a limit in AD of the custom role you could create, but I have no clue what that number is.
The number of roles itself? That's a good question. I don't know the answer to
I
that.
felt like it's endless, but I'm assuming there is a number, there's a max somewhere, but no clue.
Yeah, like if I just kept on typing this, I wonder how long it goes for.
Oh no, I mean like, how many? Are you messing with me again?
No. Like how many roles? Because
you could create dev and like a senior dev and then junior dev and super dev and like you could create endless number of different roles, right?
I would think, and that's why I was trying this. Like I'm just typing in a bunch of strings, and like if you did that, let's put one at the end. I don't know the answer to this, but if we did that, notice how it seems to have it over there. So it looks like you can create an endless number of them, but I will ask and find out from the team. And if you want to ask me that question on Twitter, I will get you an answer to that. That's a great question. Something I forgot to mention, and you're making me think of this, Vinay Caesar. Thank you for asking. Any tips on CLI commands to interact with those roles instead of going to the UI? There is an Azure CLI for using static web apps. I don't use that one much, so I don't know the exact commands, but you can try that out. It's in the docs. But there's also a VS Code extension for static web apps. And let's see if I don't have it loaded here. You could go into the extensions and type in static web apps. And I don't have it installed on this machine. It's a preview, but if you install that, you can look down and see, like, you can actually create the app without going to Azure Portal at all. You can just click this plus button. It's going to say, hey, you want to sign with GitHub, which it'll do for you. You select your repository, your application folder, your API, and your build artifact. It's the same questions. You're just doing it in VS Code. And then you're going to get this panel inside of VS Code where you can actually update and manipulate your Azure Static Web App right from VS Code, so you never have to go to the portal at all. So I'm glad you asked, because I forgot to mention the VS Code extension. So go download it and install it. I'll put a link inside of Frank's Twitter, or Skype, sorry. Whatever the heck we're using.
Soon we'll be using Teams, but it's not there yet.
Yep, and Frank put more in there for the docs. Does the extension work in Visual Studio? No, these extensions only, this one here is for VS Code.
I'm sure it will come eventually.
Yes, yeah. I mean, again, preview.
Yeah.
So in preview,
VS Code has a little bit faster life cycle. Is it that, like the feature come faster on VS Code, but it's lighter, right?
Yeah, it's super light. Like installing VS Code is super light and quick. We find, quite frankly, that most people dealing with these web frameworks are using VS Code. It's the most popular web editor out there. So that's usually the first place you'll see these things pop up. But Visual Studio, absolutely, I can see this. If it's not there now, I can see this coming.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I think we missed, what's the largest performance bottleneck from Captain Downs?
Captain Downsy.
Yeah.
I like that name. You guys have all cool names. I'm just boring. I just got John Papa. What's the biggest bottleneck? So there is when you're looking at these apps, you're getting your content stored at multiple points of presence around the world. So that's super fast. Your bottlenecks are going to come from things like your how much content you're pushing. What this isn't solving is if you store, for example, an image, and that image is 10 meg, and you don't compress it, it's still going to be serving your 10 meg image. So you have to still be smart. Like you have to build your apps so they're optimized, is kind of my point. You still want to build your apps, optimize your images, etc. That's a big bottleneck. Another thing, or it could be one. Another thing is that when you're using Azure Functions API, the data, if you have a consumption-based Azure Functions API, what does that mean? It's what Frank meant earlier about pay-as-you-go. You get Azure Functions, and what happens in the background is you don't pay for it when you're not using it, but as soon as somebody hits it, it cranks up a server and lets them use it. When you're using consumption-based functions, there is what you call a cold start to start the function. So the very first user who hits it is going to see a couple of seconds delay for the data. You may have noticed this when we went to the app right here for the first time and I clicked on list. Now it's instant because it's up. But the very first time I went to shop at home, if nobody has been on that site for, I don't know, 20 minutes or so, or whatever the time is, it takes 2 or 3 seconds for it to crank up. But if you got 10,000 users, that's not a big deal because only the first one's going to see that 2 or 3 seconds. After that, it's, as you can see, it's lightning fast.
Yeah, just by doing your validation test to see if this website is running, you will wake up everything.
Yep.
Or you could pay more, I'm assuming, like for like maybe like when things go GA, you could pay for the reserve. I forgot how they call that in functions. You can have like
Premier?
the reserve instance or something like that. I forgot the name.
Yeah, I think they call it the Premier level. I may have the words wrong too, but yeah, you
there's
can.
a Prime version in function, so maybe it will follow. But again, like we don't know because right now it's in preview, so we'll see when it's in GA.
All we can tell you is that there's a very good possibility when it goes full GA that there will be a level, like a pricing level above free. Like there'll still be free, but there'll be a level above free if you need like always on functions or you need other stuff. What's going to be in that level, I don't know yet, and Frank doesn't know, so we're not going to guess.
Yeah. Well, we will need to get you back again on the stream, John, because the chat is in fire and the time is running out. So if you have any questions, you can always ping John Papa, spam him on Twitter. His Twitter account is just above his head, John _Papa. Or you can ping me if we should host, and I will do my best because I learned a lot today.
Above me or below me.
Thank you, John, for being with us today. It was awesome. I seriously learned a lot. I thought I knew my static web app, and yeah, I learned stuff. I'm happy. Now I'm just looking forward to do one of those. I need to migrate my my blog on that.
You should. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, but my problem right now is I'm using .NET, so.
Well, you could do Blazor. There you go.
Well, I'm doing Blazor I have a little project that I'm streaming on, and I'm doing Blazor, so we'll probably do that for that thing. Thank you a lot. Thank you for spending your time with us. For people in the chat, thank you a lot to spending your time with us, learning, sharing, asking your question. Tons of very good questions today. And like I said, if you have any question, ping us on Twitter. We like your feedback. If you have feature requests and stuff, go in the GitHub, create issues over there. The product is in preview, so it's the perfect time to do those kind of things. And
Thanks,
with
everybody.
that, the word of the word of the end of the last word.
All is good, man. I think that I really love all the questions, and yeah, you all gave me some good things to think about. And please, as Frank mentioned, find us on Twitter and ask anything else you might have forgotten about.
So with that, I will say bye-bye.